Hi, I'm Shane with Freshee Motorsports. Today we're going to talk about tools for working on your bike, and not just your general wrenches, screwdrivers, ratchets, that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the specialty tools you need if you're going to do your own top end rebuild. There's a few tools that you need to do a top end rebuild that's going to be reliable and trouble free. There's some measurements you need to make, and I'm going to go over those tools. But please subscribe to the YouTube channel and like our videos, and post some comments if there's things that you want to see us do a video on. Post a comment and we'll try to get to that. So first off, a fairly simple tool. It's just a set of calipers. It's a dial caliper. They make these in digital. For those of you that really don't know how to read a dial caliper, the digital calipers, I mean, it's anybody can read those. So the calipers are something that you need. A really important tool that you need for checking your piston to cylinder clearance is a micrometer. The micrometers, these things measure in tenths of a thousandths. And when you're doing a top end rebuild, you need to be able to measure the piston as accurately as possible. The piston to cylinder clearance is generally about 2 thousandths on most bikes. It can vary a little bit, but if you're a little loose, if the piston is a little more, there's a little more than 2 thousandths clearance, you're not going to have the power that you normally would, but it's not going to be really that noticeable. But if your piston is a little bit too big and you don't have enough clearance, you're going to end up seizing the engine. You're going to damage the piston, and you're going to damage the cylinder. So you really need this, and the micrometer, you're going to use that to measure the piston itself. So along with the micrometer to measure the cylinder, you need a dial bore gauge. The dial bore gauge, you set that up. Once you've taken the measurement of the piston itself, you lock the micrometer down, and then you zero out your dial bore gauge. And once you've got that zeroed, when you drop it down in the cylinder, you're going to see it's going to tell you how much bigger the cylinder is than the piston, and that's where your clearance is. So you want these things to be as tight as you can get them within the specs of the piston manufacturer. So the only way you can do that is with the dial bore gauge and the micrometer. Another tool that you'll need is a set of feeler gauges. This particular set goes from 1 thousandths up to 35 thousandths. That's going to measure things like your ring end gap. That's really important. There's a spec. All the manufacturers give you a spec, the minimum ring end gap. And so with this, you can measure your end gap. You can also, if you're working on a 4-stroke bike, this is what you're going to use to measure your valve clearance, which is really important on those. Another tool that you will need if you have a 4-stroke bike and you're doing a 4-stroke top end is a valve spring compressor. You can get the valves out of the bike without this, but there's no way to get them back in. You've got to have a valve spring compressor. These aren't too expensive. The dial bore gauge and the micrometers are going to be two of your more expensive items. These aren't too bad. You can pick these up usually about $30–40 for the set. You got to have it to do a 4-stroke top end. The next thing that you're going to need is a good torque wrench. When you're putting the engine back together on a 2-stroke, your cylinder base bolts, there's a torque spec for those. Those need to be really accurate. Your cylinder head bolts on both a 2 and 4-stroke, you're going to need to use a torque wrench on those. That's going to give you a real even torque. You're not going to warp anything up. You're going to have the right amount of torque. You're not going to have too much. Get you a torque wrench. Get you a good one. This is actually a foot-pound torque wrench. You'll use that for things like head bolts, your cylinder base bolts on a 2-stroke. There's some other places where you need. This is a 10 foot-pound up to 75 foot-pound. That's going to cover most everything you're going to need on a bike. The other one you really need is an inch-pound. This is going to be for doing some of the smaller critical bolts like your cam cap bolts. If you get those things too tight, you're going to seize the cams up. If you get them too loose, the cams are going to beat the bearing surfaces out. So you got to have that. So, that's some of the tools that you need. One last thing that you really need, this is really important, is a surface plate. The surface plate, this is a granite surface plate. It's just a perfectly flat, smooth surface. And basically what you do is you put a piece of sandpaper on that. You use that to resurface the top of your cylinder where the cylinder head mates to it and the cylinder head mating surfaces. You want those to be really flat, really smooth. After a bike has run for a while, the constant heat and cooling cycle that they go through, the compression that they have, your cylinder head and your cylinder is not going to be perfectly flat. I mean, it's not going to be bad, but it's not going to be perfectly flat. So having the surface plate with some 400 to 600 grit sandpaper allows you to make sure that both of those surfaces are flat. So, that's basically your specialty tools for a top end. You're looking at probably $250, $300 to cover all of those tools. And if you think about it, you can do your own top end. You do it 2 or 3 times, and you're going to save that money. So definitely look into getting the correct tools. And like I say, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Please like our videos and give us some comments. Give me some feedback on what you want to see. If you have any questions that I didn't cover, I'll try to do that for you.